Agatha Raisin and the Fatal Christmas Lights Walk. Good evening, and welcome back, dear friends. On Carsley's annual Christmas Lights Walk, Agatha Raisin notices one house glowing brighter than the rest, until the display flickers, revealing a body tangled in the lights. As the village panics, Agatha stays calm, alert, sensing the quiet start of a darker holiday mystery. Before Agatha steps into today's mystery, we'd love to know something special from you. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Your comments remind us how far these little village tales can travel, and how close they bring us all. And if these stories bring you comfort, do subscribe so you never miss a gentle moment with Agatha. Let's begin tonight's mystery.
Chapter 1. A Village Wrapped in Lights. The evening air carried a soft chill as Agatha Raisin stepped onto Carsley's main lane, joining the slow-moving crowd gathering for the annual Christmas Lights Walk. Lanterns bobbed gently above knitted hats, and warm breath drifted like pale clouds in the fading dusk. Agatha tugged her scarf tighter, pretending to mind the cold, though she secretly enjoyed the shared hush that always settled over the village before the lights blinked to life. It was one of the few holiday traditions she tolerated with something close to contentment. When the first switch clicked on, a gentle wave of golden light spread across the cottages, revealing strings of stars, shimmering icicles, and glowing reindeer perched proudly in front gardens. Children squealed, parents murmured appreciatively, and Agatha allowed herself a small smile. She could admit it. Carsley did look charming when everyone put aside their usual fussing and attempted something beautiful together. Even she wasn't immune to the soft glow of fairy lights wrapped neatly around fences and the faint scent of mulled cider drifting from someone's open door. She moved along the path at an easy pace, letting the crowd filter past her. It gave her room to observe, which was half the fun. Mr. and Mrs. Pembury were already discussing whose display would win the informal village favorite, a conversation they repeated every year with identical passion. Across the lane, two neighbors pointed out a freshly installed arrangement of luminous snowflakes, each claiming they'd seen the other borrow the idea first. Agatha bit back a laugh. Village rivalries were as dependable as the seasons. Near the bend, however, the mood shifted slightly. A couple stood close to a heavily decorated cottage, their voices low but sharp enough to catch Agatha's attention. The woman clutched her coat with stiff fingers, while the man kept glancing toward the windows, as if someone inside might overhear. Their argument was too soft to decipher, yet the tension around them seemed to ripple into the chilled evening. Agatha slowed, pretending to admire a glowing wreath, but the pair moved away before she caught more than a hurried, "Not tonight," followed by an uneasy silence. A moment later, the lights overhead flickered, only for a breath, but long enough for several villagers to gasp and glance skyward. Power flickers weren't unusual during the holidays. Too many extension cords, too many ambitious decorators. But something about the quick stutter unsettled Agatha. It felt more like a warning than a blip. When the lights steadied, she scanned the rooftops and noticed one cottage blazing brighter than the rest, its white bulbs sharp and almost glaring. The brightness was impressive, but not quite right, as if someone had overcompensated or wired things with careless enthusiasm. A dog barked suddenly, loud and persistent. It strained at its leash, growling toward a dark gap between two hedges. Its owner tugged repeatedly, muttering apologies to passers-by, though the dog refused to settle. The barking echoed through the lane, bouncing oddly against the festive backdrop. Agatha followed its gaze, squinting into the shadowed space, but saw only the faint outline of a shed and a thin dusting of frost. Still, the dog's agitation prickled her curiosity. She drifted farther along, exchanging polite nods with neighbors, though several seemed strangely evasive tonight. One avoided her completely, darting behind a group of chattering teenagers. Another offered a quick, uneasy smile before turning away. Perhaps she was imagining it, but the village appeared to be carrying more secrets than usual, folded neatly beneath its glowing decorations. Agatha inhaled deeply, letting the cold air steady her thoughts. The Christmas Lights Walk was meant to be peaceful, a gentle celebration to welcome winter. Yet as the evening unfolded, she sensed a faint undercurrent threading through the brightness, a whisper of something waiting to surface. She couldn't name it yet, but her instincts stirred, guiding her gaze toward that overly bright cottage once more. Something there tugged at her attention, asking to be noticed. And Agatha Raisin rarely ignored a feeling like that.
A soft hum of conversation filled the lane as villagers continued their slow procession from one glowing cottage to the next. Agatha had just stepped aside to let a pair of excited children rush past when the lights flickered again, once, twice, and then dissolved into complete darkness. The sudden blackness swallowed the lane so thoroughly that the crowd gasped as one. A few murmurs trembled through the air, followed by nervous laughter and a distant clatter as someone knocked over a lantern. Agatha stayed perfectly still, letting her eyes adjust while her ears did the work. She heard the shuffle of feet, the strained whisper of a woman trying to reassure her child, and the quick tap of someone fumbling with their phone torch. Farther ahead, a voice called out, "Probably the circuit again," though it carried more hope than certainty. Agatha frowned. Something about the silence beneath the noise felt oddly expectant, like the village was holding its breath. Then, abruptly, the lights blazed back to life, but not all of them. Every cottage remained draped in darkness, except one, the same overly bright house she'd noticed earlier. Its lights snapped on, not in their previous warm glow, but in a harsh, stark white that washed the entire lawn in an unsteady shimmer. The brightness was almost painful, casting long, unnatural shadows across the grass. People shielded their eyes, squinting into the glare. A moment later, someone screamed. Agatha was already moving, weaving through the startled crowd with purposeful steps. As she approached the illuminated lawn, the shape at its center became clear, a body, sprawled across tangled strings of lights. The cords wound around the figure like vines, some still flickering faintly. The victim lay motionless, half illuminated, half cast in unsettling contrast by the two bright bulbs. Several villagers froze at the edge of the walkway, muttering in disbelief. "Is he—" one whispered. Another shook her head, pressing a hand to her mouth. The homeowner, a thin, anxious man named Colin Whitby, stumbled forward and dropped to his knees near the porch steps. This can't be happening. My lights were checked. They were perfectly safe." Agatha crouched near the edge of the lawn, careful not to disturb anything. Her eyes moved quickly, taking in details that others ignored. The body was positioned awkwardly, as if it hadn't simply fallen, but been caught mid-motion. Several bulbs near the victim were shattered, their glass scattered in tiny arcs. And along one cord, she spotted something far more curious. Scorch marks that didn't match the light pattern. Too concentrated, too deliberate. She shifted slightly, noticing the main control box half hidden behind a decorative snowman. The timer switch was missing entirely, leaving a frayed gap where it should have clicked neatly into place. A small dark smear along the edge suggested it had been yanked rather than loosened. Agatha's instincts flared. This wasn't an accident of tangled lights and bad wiring. Someone had interfered. Behind her, villagers began chattering louder, mixing shock with the uneasy thrill of unfolding drama. A woman insisted she'd seen a flash before the blackout. A man claimed he heard a strange buzzing sound earlier, but dismissed it as part of the display. Their accounts wavered between certainty and confusion, none quite aligning with their expressions. Agatha glanced over her shoulder and caught more than one person avoiding her gaze entirely. Colin kept repeating that his display had been safe, though his voice cracked each time, suggesting he doubted the words himself. Agatha stood slowly, scanning the windows and eaves of the glowing cottage. No other lights in the village had come back on. Only this house, lit like a stage where something terrible had found its spotlight. The cozy evening had shifted, almost imperceptibly, into something sharper, not frightening yet, but unmistakably wrong. And Agatha felt the first firm tug of the mystery drawing her in. Chapter 2. A Death in the Glow. Chaos always revealed more truth than calm, Agatha believed.
And tonight's confusion was no exception. As villagers clustered anxiously around the glowing lawn, she stepped back just far enough to see the entire picture. Children were hurried indoors, elderly neighbors whispered fiercely, and several people attempted to direct each other despite having no clearer idea of what had happened than anyone else. Agatha folded her arms, surveying the scene with her usual, unapologetic decisiveness. She approached the nearest pair of witnesses, Mrs. Plimpton and her sister, both clutching their shopping bags like shields. "When the lights came back," Agatha asked gently, "what did you see first?" Mrs. Plimpton insisted the house's lights had surged brighter than ever, nearly blinding her. Her sister, however, swore they'd flickered 3 times before stabilizing. The 2 women argued between themselves before Agatha thanked them and moved on, barely concealing her frustration. A teenager leaning on his bicycle claimed he saw a blue flash, though he couldn't pinpoint where it came from. Meanwhile, Mr. Birtles declared he heard a loud crack, but his wife insisted it was only her elbow popping. Each statement contradicted the last, leaving Agatha with a swirling mixture of maybe truths to sift through. But even contradictions mattered. They often hinted at what people were trying not to say. The rumble of an engine drew fresh attention as a familiar police car pulled up. Bill Wong emerged first, coat unbuttoned, hair slightly out of place, and expression tight with the strain of coordinating a village full of startled onlookers. "Everyone, please step back and give us space," he called, attempting authority while juggling sympathetic smiles. Agatha caught his eye and gave him a small nod. He responded with a weary half-smile, the kind that said he was glad to see her but couldn't publicly admit it. Unfortunately, the evening's peace dissolved further when Inspector Wilkes stepped out behind Bill. His frown was already in place, as though he'd been practicing it for the past hour. "Raisin," he muttered the moment he spotted her, his tone suggesting she was not merely unwelcome, but personally responsible for the blackout. "This is a police matter, Raisin. Kindly keep yourself out of the way." Agatha raised one eyebrow. "I'm standing in a public lane, Inspector, not rummaging through evidence." "Not yet, and I'd like it to stay that way." Bill shot her an apologetic look, but was quickly pulled aside by Wilkes, who launched into a muttered complaint that carried hints of irritation, pressure, and something else, unease. Wilkes was rarely subtle, and tonight he seemed unusually rattled. Agatha couldn't help noticing the tension bristling beneath his brisk orders. With the officials distracted, she drifted toward the side of the house, moving with an air of innocent curiosity that fooled absolutely no one, but often got her where she needed to be. The cottage exterior revealed far more than the crowd did. Near the fuse box, the snow had been disturbed by a muddle of footprints, some neat, others haphazard. 2 sets stood out. One pair appeared small, perhaps belonging to someone light on their feet. The other left deeper impressions, the heel digging in as though the person had been bracing themselves. Agatha crouched, tracing the pattern with her eyes. The footprints overlapped near the fuse panel door, which hung slightly ajar. Odd. Colin Whidbey didn't strike her as the type to leave things undone, especially not something involving electricity. She straightened and scanned the ground, spotting a shattered ornament lying a short distance away. Its fragments glittered like tiny jewels in the glow of the still unearthing lights. A struggle? A stumble? Perhaps someone had grabbed at the decoration in haste. She slipped the largest piece into view with her shoe, careful not to touch it. A smear, dark, thin, almost missed, marked one edge. She tilted her head thoughtfully. This was no simple holiday accident. Behind her, Wilkes barked another order, clearly agitated. Bill tried to calm him, but the inspector's irritation only grew. Agatha watched the pair for a moment, noting how Wilkes kept glancing toward the bright cottage with something approaching dread. Whatever happened here tonight, it was already unsettling the people involved, and Agatha intended to know why.
Agatha stepped closer to the cordoned-off patch of lawn as murmurs rippled across the gathered villagers. The over-bright lights still glared against the night, casting a chilly glow on the tangled figure beneath them. She crossed her arms, narrowing her eyes as Bill Wong returned from a brief conversation with one of the constables. His expression was tight, strained at the edges. "They've identified him," Bill said quietly, stopping beside her. "It's Graham Enderby." Agatha blinked. She knew Graham. Not well, but well enough to recall his easy laugh, his sturdy frame, and the way he always brought a spare set of bulbs to the church decorating committee. Graham? But he's the one who fixes everyone's fairy lights. Half the village would be in the dark without him. Bill nodded, rubbing his forehead. Retired electrician. Still volunteers for all the festive events. He set up this display earlier today. Before Agatha could respond, a sharp cry broke through the cold air. Sheila Enderby came rushing up the lane, her coat thrown over a nightdress, slippers sinking into the frosty grass. She pushed past two villagers who tried to steady her and stumbled toward Bill. "Where is he?" she demanded, breathless. "Where's my husband?" Bill gently guided her away from the glare. "Sheila, I'm so sorry. The lights malfunctioned. There was a—" "No," she interrupted, shaking her head violently. "Graham wouldn't have touched the lights during the walk. He helped with that earlier, yes, but he always double-checked everything. He knew the risks. He wouldn't have been fiddling with wires in the dark." Her voice trembled, yet her eyes darted past Bill toward the display, scanning it with a kind of panicked intensity. Wilkes approached, hands behind his back, posture stiff. "Mrs. Enderby, I assure you this appears to be a tragic accident. Faulty wiring, most likely. Your husband must have come out to correct something last minute." "That's not true," Sheila snapped. "He locked the shed at 5. He said everything was finished." Wilkes, without missing a beat, offered a thin, polite smile. "Grief clouds the mind. People remember things differently in times of stress." Agatha's jaw tightened. The man's condescension was almost a talent. She stepped closer to Sheila, speaking gently. "When you say he locked the shed, did he mention anyone helping him tonight? Anyone he gave access to the display?" Sheila hesitated for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable unless one knew the signs of a person scrambling for a plausible answer. "No, no one," she finally said. "Graham always did the lights himself. He didn't want anyone messing them up." Agatha nodded slowly. Around them, the villagers whispered in clusters, their breath forming pale clouds. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others exchanged meaningful looks, as though sorting through memories of recent conversations with Graham. A few avoided Sheila entirely. Wilkes clapped his hands sharply. "Right, everyone! Accident confirmed. The constables will tidy the scene and will arrange for the body to be moved. Go home, all of you." "Already?" Agatha asked, eyebrow raised. "You haven't even checked the wiring." "I don't need to," Wilkes replied curtly. "The conclusion is obvious. Electrician, lights, faulty setup, case closed." Agatha gave him a cool, steady look. "Sometimes the obvious explanation is simply the most convenient." Wilkes ignored her and strode off toward his officers. Bill lingered. "Agatha, maybe leave this one be." She studied Sheila one more time. The widow now stood rigidly beside a constable, wringing her hands, her gaze glued to the display. Not to her husband's body, but to the wires snaking across the ground. "No," Agatha murmured, stepping back from the lights. "There's something tangled here, Bill, and it's not just the cords." Chapter 3. Sparks Beneath the Snow. Morning settled over Carsley like a soft woolen blanket, muting the world beneath pale winter sunlight. Frost coated the hedges in a delicate shimmer, and smoke curled from chimneys as villagers emerged for their usual routines, albeit with a lingering tension that pulsed gently beneath the quiet. Agatha sensed it the moment she stepped out her door. People walked a little faster, spoke in lowered voices, and glanced toward the lane where Graham Enderby had died, as though expecting the lights to flicker ominously again. She wrapped her scarf tighter and set off toward the village shop. Nothing fueled information like the promise of fresh bread and mild scandal. Inside, the familiar bell chimed overhead.
Mrs. Bloxby stood near the counter chatting with Mrs. Cartwright, who looked unusually flustered for someone selecting a tin of cocoa. They paused when Agatha entered, exchanging a look that practically sparkled with unsaid gossip. "Morning, Agatha," Mrs. Bloxby greeted warmly. "Quite the unfortunate business last night. I selected a loaf of granary bread with deliberation. Unfortunate indeed, though I suspect the situation deserves more scrutiny than Wilkes seems willing to give." Mrs. Cartwright leaned closer, lowering her voice to a whisper that carried across the shelves anyway. "I heard Graham had a row with Leonard Pike just yesterday. Something about decorations encroaching on the boundary line. Leonard was furious his little Santa sleigh was overshadowed. I raised an eyebrow. Leonard Pike's decorations were famously gaudy, oversized reindeer, neon elves, and a sleigh that played a tinny version of Jingle Bells. Hard to overshadow that monstrosity," Mrs. Cartwright tutted. "Leonard said Graham marched right up and told him the display was unsafe, claimed he was protecting the village. Leonard insisted Graham was exaggerating. Did Leonard change anything after that?" Agatha asked casually. "Not a thing," Mrs. Cartwright said, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. "Stubborn as ever." Agatha paid for her bread, thanked the women, and stepped back into the cold. The village green shimmered with last night's frost. She decided to stop at the pub next, knowing full well that by late morning half the village would already be discussing the incident over tea or an early pint. The Red Lion was warm, smelling of pine garlands and the lingering trace of last night's mulled wine. A handful of locals hovered near the fireplace, including Harry Beamish, who straightened immediately when Agatha entered, as though caught mid-conversation. "Agatha," he said, forcing a smile. "Terrible thing about Graham." "Yes," she replied, removing her gloves. "I imagine people have thoughts." Harry cleared his throat. "Well, I saw him yesterday afternoon. Odd mood he was. Kept watching Philomena Turner's house, you know, those new icicle lights, the expensive ones. Graham circled round twice, inspecting them. I assumed he was admiring the workmanship. Or checking something else," Agatha said. Harry gave a quick, nervous cough. "You didn't hear that from me." She shifted her attention to the far end of the bar where Doris Simpson, the barmaid, was polishing glasses with unusual vigor. "Busy morning?" she asked lightly. "If one more person tells me Sheila Enderby looked relieved last night, I'm throwing someone out. People don't know what to do with real grief." Agatha tilted her head. "Relieved?" "Well, not relieved," Doris amended, flustered. "Just, she said Graham had been making choices lately she didn't agree with. That's all. People love twisting things." Agatha filed the remark away. A disagreement before a death stirred curiosity. A man at a nearby table muttered, "Probably all part of that secret competition." Agatha turned. "Competition?" The man jumped. "Nothing. Just talk. Some villagers are taking the Christmas Lights Cup a bit too seriously this year." Agatha thanked him anyway and stepped back into the crisp air, her mind already weaving threads. The whispers were small, quiet, and scattered, but they were far from harmless. In Carsley, even the gentlest gossip could point toward something deeper hiding beneath the snow.
The lane felt quieter than it had any right to be, considering the stir of the previous night. Frost still clung to the hedges, but the bright winter morning softened the scene, making Graham Enderby's death seem almost unreal, until Agatha spotted the strip of police tape fluttering weakly in the breeze. She stepped beneath it with a practiced ease, glancing around to ensure no one would object. Most villagers were sensibly indoors, and Wilkes had already finished his perfunctory sweep hours earlier. She approached the patch of lawn where Graham had fallen. The lights had been removed, but faint indentations remained in the frosted grass, marking where he had collapsed in a tangle of wires. Her eyes moved to the small fragment she had noticed last night, now resting where she'd left it near the garden border. A sliver of ceramic, no larger than a matchbox, yet distinct in shape and color. Agatha crouched, lifting it carefully. The glaze shimmered softly, pale gold with a faintly embossed swirl pattern. Not from Graham's inexpensive display, she realized. His decorations leaned toward friendly, practical designs. Snowmen, candy canes, simple lantern shapes.
This piece belonged to someone with more ambition. She brushed frost from the edge and turned it over, piecing its shape together in her mind. A star. A very specific star, in fact. One she admired through gritted teeth during the last 2 Christmas seasons. Mrs. Margaret Thatcher, notorious for her immaculate displays, had commissioned a series of handcrafted ceramic stars from an artisan in Chipping Norton, each carefully arranged, each hung with almost militaristic precision. Agatha rose slowly, the shard pinched between her fingers. What was one of Mrs. Margaret Thatcher's prize decorations doing in Graham Enderby's garden? She scanned the nearby ground and spotted 2 more fragments half buried in frost. She gathered them, noting how the break patterns angled sharply, as though the star had been ripped violently from wherever it hung. This wasn't the gentle fall of a loose ornament. It was the result of force, deliberate or panicked. She imagined it, a confrontation in the dim evening light before the walk began. Harsh whispers, a grabbed sleeve, a hand reaching for the nearest object, a struggle brief enough to leave only scattered pieces and a heated impression in the frost. Footsteps approached behind her. Agatha didn't turn. Few people walked with that combination of resignation and steady tread. "Agatha," Bill Wong said, sounding weary, "you know Wilkes will have a fit if he catches you here." "He already had his fit last night," she replied calmly, still inspecting the ceramic. "This is different. Look." Bill drew closer, kneeling beside her. When she placed the fragments in his hand, he let out a low sigh. "Mrs. Thatcher's?" "Exactly." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I shouldn't even acknowledge that. Wilkes wants the report clean. You know what he's like. Simple explanations, quick conclusions." "And you?" Agatha asked. Bill's expression softened. "I want the truth, but I also need to keep my job." Their eyes met briefly, warm but strained. Agatha recognized the conflict in him, duty clashing with instinct. Bill trusted her, sometimes more than he trusted proper procedure, but that trust came at a cost. "Did Wilkes collect anything else from the scene?" she asked casually. Bill hesitated. "Not long, but long enough. There was a timer switch missing from the main cable. He thinks Graham removed it himself, claims it was an accident caused by amateur adjustments." Agatha shook her head. Graham was an electrician, a precise one. He didn't improvise wiring on a busy village night. Bill's shoulders slumped. "I know," he admitted. She slipped the ceramic pieces into a small plastic bag she always kept in her coat. The cold air wrapped around her, sharp and still, carrying whispers of secrets buried beneath twinkling lights, and she was ready to follow every one of them.
Chapter 4. A Tangle of Timers. Sheila Enderby opened the workshop door as though revealing something fragile and private, her fingers trembling slightly on the handle. The scent of wood shavings and cold metal drifted out, mingling with a faint trace of soldering. Agatha stepped inside carefully. The space was surprisingly neat, far more orderly than she had expected from a man known for tackling every village wiring issue with boundless enthusiasm. Shelves lined the walls, holding boxes of bulbs, coils of cables, and labeled jars of screws. Everything had a place. Graham liked things tidy, Sheila murmured, arms wrapped around herself. Said chaos caused mistakes. Agatha offered a gentle nod, not wanting to spook her further. Sheila's grief hovered like frost, brittle, delicate, and unpredictable. But beneath it, something else flickered, an uneasiness that didn't quite fit the sorrow of a recent widow. She moved toward the workbench where a half-assembled device sat among tools arranged with precise symmetry. It was a small metal box, open at the top, with circuits fanning out like a delicate mechanical flower. Wires of different colors were neatly stripped and coiled, waiting for their turn to be connected. A digital timer display rested beside it. "This is no ordinary Christmas timer," Agatha said quietly. Sheila stiffened. "He enjoyed tinkering. It kept him occupied after retirement." "Tinkering is one thing," Agatha replied, leaning in. But this looks like an advanced control system, something that could manage multiple power channels or switch sequences. Why would he need something like this for holiday lights? Sheila's eyes darted toward the door. I told him not to get carried away. Agatha noticed the woman's voice trembled ever so slightly. Did he mention what he was building it for? Just the village lights, she said too quickly. He thought he could help. Said people didn't understand the dangers of overloading circuits. Agatha let the explanation linger without accepting it. She reached for a small notebook on the workbench, its leather cover slightly worn, as if touched often. Graham made a faint noise of protest, but didn't stop her. Inside, Graham's handwriting filled several pages with careful diagrams, voltage calculations, and short, abrupt notes. One line caught Agatha's eye immediately. Last test tonight. Another. Must fix her mistake before it's too late. Agatha tapped the page thoughtfully. Sheila, who is the her he mentions? I don't know. Probably me. I broke one of his tools last week. He was cross about it. Agatha recognized deflection when she heard it. Sheila was a practical woman, not one to wilt under small criticisms. Whatever Graham meant, it carried more weight than a misplaced screwdriver. Did Graham help anyone else with their decorations this year? Agatha asked casually. He helped everyone, really, Sheila said, voice shaky. People relied on him. Specifically this week? Sheila hesitated. He helped Margaret Thatcher ask him to check her wiring. She always does, even when she insists everything is perfect. Agatha's mind pricked with interest. Margaret Thatcher again. Did he go? Yes, Sheila said. 2 days ago. He came back irritated, said she'd been reckless. But he also said he had managed to sort it. Sort what? Agatha wondered. She returned her attention to the control box. A section of wiring had been tested recently. She could tell by the faint scorch marks near the solder points. Graham had been working late, focused, determined, and whatever he was trying to fix, he believed it was urgent. May I take a closer look? Agatha asked. Sheila nodded reluctantly. Agatha lifted the box gently, examining the connections. Some wires weren't secured yet, but the design suggested a fail-safe mechanism, something intended to prevent overheating or electrical surges, perhaps even override another device. What was Graham trying to stop? She murmured under her breath. Behind her, Sheila pressed her hands together, fingers twisting. Please, don't make this worse. Graham hated fuss. He'd hate all this attention. Agatha studied her face. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here because accidents rarely leave notes behind. Sheila's expression briefly cracked. Fear, guilt, worry, before smoothing over again. Agatha carefully closed the notebook, her thoughts buzzing with the same quiet insistence as Graham's unfinished circuits. Someone had made a mistake. Graham knew it, and whatever he tried to fix last night, it cost him his life. And the answers were beginning to take shape.
The air outside Graham's workshop felt sharper than before, as though the cold had crept deeper into the village overnight. Agatha pulled her coat tight, exhaling a faint cloud into the crisp afternoon. Sheila lingered in the doorway for a moment, then retreated inside without another word, shutting the door quietly behind her. Agatha stepped down the narrow path toward the gate, planning her next move. She meant to walk straight to her car, but something caught her eye near the base of the garden wall, a stone that didn't quite match the rest. A small, rounded piece of slate sat oddly atop a patch of disturbed snow. She paused, crouching to brush the frost aside. Beneath the stone lay a folded scrap of paper. Her eyebrows lifted. Someone had rushed this, judging by the uneven fold. She lifted the note, the paper chilled and slightly damp. A few bold strokes formed 2 short words. Stop digging. The letters leaned unevenly, as if written by a hand not accustomed to threat-making, or one trembling with nerves. Agatha scanned the lane immediately, but no one lingered. Only the slow drift of snowflakes and the distant hum of a generator disturbed the silence. A lesser soul might have felt alarm. Agatha felt something else entirely. Curiosity, sharpening like a blade. "Amateurs," she muttered, tucking the note into her pocket. If someone wanted her to stop, it only meant she was inching closer to whatever truth they feared. She headed toward the village green, where Mrs. Margaret Thatcher's home sat proudly on the corner, still glittering with its regimented rows of lights. Even in daylight, the display sparkled with unnecessary vigor. Agatha rang the bell, hearing the chime echo crisply within. Moments later, Mrs. Thatcher opened the door. Her hair was set in its usual stiff style, and her expression carried its usual mixture of superiority and mild annoyance, though today something flickered beneath it. "Agatha Raisin," she said, sounding as though she'd swallowed a lemon. "To what do I owe the visit?" "I'm doing a bit of follow-up about Graham Enderby," Agatha said smoothly. "May I come in?" Mrs. Thatcher hesitated, just for a second, enough for Agatha to notice. Then she stepped aside and allowed her into the immaculate hallway, scented faintly of pine polish and peppermint. "I heard you had Graham look over your lights earlier this week," Agatha began, removing her gloves. Mrs. Thatcher bristled. "I ask him every year. Not because I need help, of course, but because the village committee insists on safety inspections." "And how did it go?" Another hesitation. Mrs. Thatcher smoothed the sleeve of her sweater, an unconscious gesture Agatha recognized as discomfort. "Fine. Perfectly fine. He fussed as usual. Said I'd overloaded a minor connection. Honestly, some people exaggerate everything." Agatha let that statement hang before reaching into her pocket and extracting the small evidence bag containing the ceramic fragments. She held it up silently. Mrs. Thatcher's face drained several shades. "Where did you get that?" "In Graham's garden, near where he fell." "That's impossible," she snapped, but the tremor in her voice softened the certainty. "Are you sure?" Agatha arched her brow. She pressed her lips tightly together, eyes flicking away. "I may have lost one when I adjusted the display. Those stars are delicate. They break easily. Yet you checked with Graham 2 days ago, and he approved your wiring. Did anything else happen between you?" Mrs. Thatcher huffed, but her shoulders slumped a fraction. "He lectured me about the voltage on my main string. Said I was being careless. I told him I'd been doing this longer than he'd been retired. We had words, nothing serious. Enough to upset him." The woman's mouth pinched. "He wasn't upset. He was frustrated. With everything, I think. Said people never listened." Agatha studied her more closely. Mrs. Thatcher was nervous, guilty, perhaps, but not murderously so. More like someone afraid of being blamed for something she didn't fully understand. "Mrs. Thatcher," Agatha said gently, "if you know anything at all, that might help, now is the time." But Mrs. Thatcher shook her head firmly. "I don't. And frankly, Agatha, digging into this will only hurt people." Agatha's fingers brushed the warning note in her pocket. "Funny," she said lightly. "Someone else said the same thing." Mrs. Thatcher faltered. "What do you mean?" "Never mind," Agatha answered, stepping toward the door. "Enjoy your afternoon." Outside, snowflakes drifted lazily across the quiet lane. Agatha paused for a moment, drawing in the cold air. Someone in Cosley was scared enough to leave her a warning. Someone who believed she might uncover what Graham Enderby tried to fix, and that someone was watching her very closely.
Chapter 5. Hidden Circuits. The village lane was nearly empty when Agatha spotted Bill Wong leaning against the low stone wall near the green. The morning sun glinted off his dark hair, and his coat flapped slightly in the brisk wind. He looked tired, more so than usual, with the weight of the previous night's events pressed into the line of his shoulders. Agatha approached quietly, mindful of his mood. "Bill," she said gently, stopping a few steps away. "Fancy seeing you here this early." He started, straightening. "Agatha, didn't hear you come up." He glanced down at the lane, as though expecting someone,
or something to be lurking behind the hedge. I needed some air, away from the house. Too many questions. "You're not alone," she said lightly, leaning on the wall beside him. "I hear whispering better than anyone else in Carsley. Sometimes I like it." Bill offered a weak smile, but his eyes remained distant. "There's more than whispering, Agatha. Someone doesn't want this investigated. Not you, not me, not anyone." Her interest piqued. She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket. "I got one of these last night. Same as yours, though mine was simpler. Just 3 words. Leave it alone." Agatha's brows rose. "You didn't mention it before." "I didn't know what to say," Bill admitted, voice low. "I thought it was just a prank, or nerves. Graham had been warning me for weeks about lights, circuits, other people's setups. I dismissed it, said it was holiday fussing, nothing serious." Agatha studied him, noting the weight behind the confession. "So you ignored him?" "Yes." He let out a long breath, leaning forward on his knees. "Now I regret it. He knew something was wrong. Someone might have taken advantage of that, and he paid the price for my indifference." Her gaze softened. "Bill, that's a lot of guilt to carry alone. You didn't make this happen." "I know that," he said quietly, though his eyes told another story. "But I could have prevented it, maybe even stopped it. Graham didn't just fix lights, he tried to prevent accidents. Some villagers, some didn't listen. He flagged problems, I thought it was fuss, and now—" He trailed off, jaw tight. Agatha nudged his shoulder gently with her elbow. "Now you know better, and knowing gives you a chance to act, to understand what really happened. That's the point." He looked at her, surprised by her calm reassurance. "You make it sound simple." She gave a small, dry smile. "Simple isn't the word I'd use, but it's possible. And if anyone can make sense of it, you can, especially with a little help." Bill chuckled faintly, tension easing just enough to be visible. "You always make me feel like I'm less hopeless than I actually am." "Careful," Agatha said, voice lighter. "I might start charging for encouragement." He shook his head, but there was a spark of amusement in his eyes. "Maybe I'd pay. Right now, though, I'm worried about who could have used Graham's warnings against him. It had to be someone who knew the schedules, the displays, and, most importantly, his habits. Someone careful." Agatha's mind raced through the possibilities, already connecting threads from Graham's notes, the broken ornament, and the frantic whispers in the village. Careful and deliberate. "Yes," she said slowly, "and probably nervous, too. A person who's hiding more than just a little embarrassment." Bill nodded. "Exactly. I think the person knew what they were doing. And now, with the lights gone last night, we see the result." She rested a hand lightly on his arm. "Then we'll figure out who." Together. For the first time that morning, Bill's shoulders relaxed visibly. A small smile touched his lips, and the crisp winter air seemed a little warmer as he exhaled. Agatha, standing beside him, allowed herself a brief satisfaction. They were no closer to solving the mystery fully, but at least they were on the same side, and the first step towards uncovering the truth had been taken.
Agatha moved from house to house along the village lane, clipboard and gloves in hand, treating each display with the careful attention of a detective and the faint delight of a craftsperson inspecting fine handiwork. The frost on the grass crunched beneath her boots, and the low winter sun cast long golden shadows across Carsley's quaint cottages. What had seemed like simple festive cheer now revealed patterns that were quietly troubling. The first house she examined had been one Graham had visited earlier that week. Its lights sparkled innocuously in the morning sun, yet Agatha immediately noticed something. The extension cord, feeding the string of lanterns, had been wrapped around a nearby railing in a way that would loosen with heat. Graham had flagged the same issue, but someone had clearly retied it improperly afterward. Not dangerous yet, but clearly designed to fail under load. Next was the Moore residence.
Here, the timer had been set manually, bypassing Graham's recommended delay mechanism. The bulbs flickered faintly when she pressed the switch, and a low hum suggested strain. She crouched to inspect the wiring and saw evidence of minor burn marks, as if the system had overheated briefly before being reset. Curious, she made a note, connecting it mentally with the first observation. 2 houses, 2 minor interventions that seemed intentional or at least carelessly mischievous. Agatha continued down the lane. At the Turner's house, she found a third anomaly. A series of wires running along the garden path had been swapped, creating a loop that didn't match Graham's documented layout. If powered fully, the effect might have caused a short or triggered lights to surge unpredictably. She took careful photos and jotted notes, already beginning to see a pattern emerge. Someone had moved through the village, touching displays, altering circuits, and resetting timers in ways that could fail. Why? She muttered aloud, kneeling to inspect another loop. Testing? Revenge? Or something else entirely? Footsteps approached. Bill Wong appeared quietly, letting her work before speaking. "Find anything interesting?" he asked, glancing over her shoulder. "Yes," she said, standing. "Faulty wiring patterns. Timers manipulated. Extensions misplaced. Circuits stressed. Someone is deliberately tampering, maybe testing methods or trying to cause small failures. Graham saw this coming. He probably realized who was doing it and tried to intervene before the walk." Graham's face tightened. "You mean someone could have been orchestrating it all, and Graham got in the way?" "Exactly," Agatha said. "And the pattern isn't random. Whoever did this knew the village intimately. Every house, every display, even the timing of inspections. They moved carefully, probably confident no one would notice until it was too late." Bill whistled softly. "That narrows it down. Someone with access. Someone trusted, or at least familiar with Graham's routines." Agatha tapped her pen against her notebook. "And that means someone who had reasons to hide their involvement. If we can trace who visited multiple homes just before the walk and cross-check with Graham's notes, we might pinpoint our culprit." They continued down the lane in silence for a few minutes, observing carefully. Small details, the slightly scorched path, the looped extension cord, the bent hooks on lanterns, told a story of repeated interference. Each minor irregularity added to a larger picture, deliberate, targeted tampering that Graham had discovered, then attempted to stop. Bill glanced at her. "So the question is, who could reach all these houses without raising suspicion?" Agatha's lips curved in a faint, confident smile. "Someone the village trusts. Someone Graham might have confronted directly. And if they feared exposure, that would explain why the fatal incident happened the night of the walk." The two of them paused, surveying the festive yet strangely tense street. The cozy decorations now seemed almost like a battleground, each twinkle a signal of hidden intentions. Agatha's mind raced, cataloging every anomaly. The trail of faulty wires had revealed its pattern, and she knew she was closing in on answers. Somewhere among these tidy cottages, the person who manipulated every last string of lights was still watching, careful, deliberate, and, if Graham's warnings were any guide, dangerous.
Chapter 6. The Night of Pretense. Agatha arrived at the village green in the late afternoon, the sun dipping low and casting a soft amber glow over the rooftops. The snow had settled lightly overnight, blanketing the lane in pristine white, and every house's decorations shimmered faintly under the weak winter light. She carried a small clipboard, a pencil tucked behind her ear, and a notebook brimming with observations and questions. Today, she intended to recreate parts of the Christmas Lights Walk, not for spectacle, but to piece together the final moments of Graham Enderby's fatal evening. The first volunteer appeared almost immediately, young Mr. Hensley from the bakery, eager to help despite his flour-dusted coat. Mrs. Larkins, usually skeptical of anything involving a notebook, followed reluctantly, muttering about the cold and her rheumatism. Slowly more villagers gathered, some with curiosity, some with wariness. Agatha welcomed them warmly, explaining the exercise in terms of helping the community understand what had happened without revealing her suspicions outright. "Let's start with the lane itself," she said, gesturing toward the row of cottages still decorated from the previous night. "We'll walk as the group did, noting timing, interactions, and how the lights appear from various points. Remember, we are observing patterns, not judging." She led the group along the familiar path, instructing them to pause at key points, mimic where they might have stopped to admire the displays, and recreate the flow of conversation and foot traffic. Agatha observed closely, jotting notes as murmurs of gossip and small arguments were performed in miniature. Subtle details leapt out, the way shadows from lanterns stretched across the snow, creating dark pockets near the base of fences and hedges, areas where a person could crouch unnoticed. She stopped abruptly near the Enderby home, holding up her hand. "Here," she said, pointing to the side of the lane. "Notice the shadow along this wall. Whoever tampered with the fuse box would have been hidden here perfectly, unseen by anyone walking past, yet able to reach the wiring in seconds." Mr. Hensley shuffled closer, squinting. "It's a very tight spot, almost like built for secrecy," he whispered. "Precisely," Agatha said, smiling faintly. She marked the position on her map. "Next, we need to time the lights as they might have returned. I'll trigger small sections to mimic Graham's activation sequence." She moved toward the garden, adjusting wires and switches, while villagers followed her instructions, moving like clockwork mannequins along the path. Each flick of a switch revealed how quickly light filled the lane and where shadows would linger. "Interesting," Agatha murmured to herself. From a low vantage near the hedge, she noted the exact angle from which someone could watch Graham approach the display, adjust the fuse box, and remain hidden behind the elongated shadows. It explained the unobserved movements she had wondered about for days. "Who was absent during key minutes?" she asked aloud, more to herself than anyone else. A pause followed, the villagers glancing around uneasily. Agatha noted it mentally, her pen scratching across the paper. Timing, movement, and opportunity were coalescing. She let the volunteers finish their mini-recreation, watching as subtle patterns emerged naturally, the overlaps, pauses, and small interruptions that would have seemed trivial at the time, but now, pieced together, they revealed potential hiding spots, misaligned timers, and precise moments where a single individual could act undetected. By the end of the afternoon, the group dispersed, shivering and laughing about minor missteps. But Agatha remained, standing in the faintly golden light of dusk. She surveyed the lane one last time, taking in the recreated shadows, the faint hum of electricity, and the spaces that had permitted Graham's last movements. Quietly, she smiled. The picture was forming. Patience, observation, and a touch of imagination turned a simple festive walk into a blueprint of opportunity, and somewhere within it lay the clue to the person responsible.
Agatha approached the Enderby house again as twilight settled over Carsley, the fading light casting a soft haze over the snow-covered garden. The front windows glowed warmly, yet the house seemed quieter than usual, as though the air itself were holding its breath. She knocked gently on the door, waiting. A moment later, Sheila appeared, her posture taut, hands clasped in front of her, eyes rimmed with faint fatigue from restless sleep. "Hello, Agatha," Sheila said, voice low. "I wasn't expecting anyone this late. I had some questions I forgot to ask. About Graham, about last year's decorations." Sheila's lips pressed together, a flicker of apprehension crossing her face. I think we've discussed everything already." "Not everything," Agatha said softly, stepping inside when Sheila gestured. "I understand it's difficult. I just need to know what he was trying to fix. It seems more serious than we thought." Sheila's hands trembled as she poured 2 cups of tea. She offered one to Agatha, fingers brushing the warm mug, then sitting heavily on the sofa. The room smelled faintly of pine and lemon polish. "He was helping someone," Sheila said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who made a mistake last year. A wiring mistake. Dangerous, potentially deadly. Graham found out. He tried to correct it quietly, without causing scandal." Agatha nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. "Do you know who it was?" Sheila shook her head, lips quivering.
I can't say. If I do, it would ruin Christmas for them forever. They're a good person, generally. They didn't mean harm. Graham wanted to fix it, protect them, and keep the village safe. So he was protecting someone, Agatha murmured, even if that person wasn't aware of the danger? Yes, Sheila said, finally letting herself collapse into the cushions. He was always careful, always thoughtful. He didn't want anyone to feel shame or embarrassment, even if it was serious. But I could tell he was worried. And I think that worry made him reckless. Agatha leaned forward, curiosity tempered by compassion. Reckless how? He visited houses, checked wiring, tested circuits late at night. Sometimes he argued, softly but firmly, with people who didn't understand the risks. He didn't want to cause panic, and he was exhausted. He thought he could manage it, but... She stopped, swallowing hard, tears spilling freely now. He thought he could manage it, but something went wrong. Agatha observed her carefully, noting the mixture of fear, loyalty, and grief. Sheila's protective behavior wasn't concealment of guilt, it was shielding someone else from disgrace, even posthumously. That understanding shifted Agatha's perspective. The stakes were higher than mere decoration disputes. Human relationships, reputations, and trust had all been wrapped up in that delicate tangle of lights. Do you think this mistake could have led to... Last night? Agatha asked cautiously. Yes. Sheila nodded, voice barely audible. Yes. He tried to fix it. He probably thought it would be fine, but someone may have interfered, or... She shook her head, unable to continue. Agatha sat back, absorbing the weight of the revelation. It wasn't just electrical danger. It was emotional, social, and profoundly personal. Graham's death, while tragic, was intertwined with an unseen struggle, a quiet attempt to protect and repair mistakes without drawing attention. I understand, Agatha said gently, placing her hand over Sheila's. Thank you for telling me this. Sometimes, knowing the truth is the first step towards justice. Sheila exhaled, a shaky breath that seemed to release a fraction of the fear she had carried. Please, promise me you'll be careful. Not everyone is ready for this knowledge. Agatha smiled faintly, a mixture of reassurance and determination. I will, but secrets, like faulty wires, have a way of coming to light eventually. And as she left the Enderby house, Agatha's mind churned with the hidden connections, the unnamed person, and the dangerous mistake Graham had tried to mend. The path to revelation was clearer, yet fraught with the delicate balance of human fragility and winter shadows.
Chapter 7. A Light Too Bright. Agatha waited until the late afternoon, the sun low and pink over the snowy rooftops of Carsley, before making her way to Tom Thistle's small cottage at the edge of the village. She had traced the patterns, timed the shadows, and mentally reconstructed every movement of the Christmas lights walk. Every misaligned wire, scorched path, and displaced ornament led to the same conclusion. Tom. She knocked lightly, her heart steady, but her mind buzzing with anticipation. Tom opened the door, his usual timid expression deepening into unease when he saw her clipboard. Miss Raisin, you're, visiting again? Just a chat, Tom, Agatha said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. About the walk, the displays, and what happened last night. He swallowed and nodded, hands twisting in the folds of his sweater. I suppose we should talk. Agatha motioned him to the living room, where a modest fire crackled in the hearth. Tom sat stiffly, avoiding her gaze. She watched him carefully, noting the faint stains of wax on his sleeves and the slight singeing at his fingertips, remnants of a hurried repair session he hadn't mentioned. Tom, she began gently, Graham's death, it wasn't entirely accidental, was it? His eyes widened, panic flickering. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. I only tried to fix it. She leaned forward, encouraging but firm. We both know the truth of that, and I need to understand everything. Start from last year. The wiring, the minor fire. What really happened? He exhaled sharply, as though releasing a secret he had carried for months. It was me, he admitted, voice trembling. Last year, I wired several houses incorrectly. I was trying to help, and Graham caught it. There was a small fire at the Enderby display, and he covered it up. He didn't want to embarrass me in front of the village. He saved me from shame." His hands shook, but he insisted I fix it properly. I panicked. I thought if anyone discovered what I'd done, I'd ruin Christmas for myself, for everyone. Agatha nodded, letting him speak. "So, when Graham came by last night to check the circuits, I didn't mean to hurt him. I saw him near the ornament, trying to adjust the lights, and I grabbed the decoration to move it, and we struggled. He lost his balance and fell into the lights. I didn't plan it. It just happened." His voice cracked, mingling guilt with fear. Agatha observed his posture, his shifting eyes, and the tremor in his voice. She had pieced it together: the yanked ornament, the minor scorch marks, and the perfectly timed shadows, and the unusual pathway leading to the fuse box. Every small irregularity led to this confession, and every detail matched the reconstructed timeline. "Tom," she said softly, "you acted out of fear, not malice. Graham understood your mistake and tried to protect you, but he also tried to prevent the consequences, yours and the village's." He nodded, barely able to meet her gaze. I wanted to fix it quietly, but I was too afraid to ask for help." Agatha reached over and tapped his hand gently. "It's done now. The truth is out, and the village will understand. What matters is that Graham's intentions, and yours, were never cruel. You weren't a saboteur in the sense people think. You were just human." He exhaled. Relief and residual guilt mingled in the small living room. "I see that now. I didn't want anyone to hate me." Agatha smiled faintly, the warmth of the fire reflecting in her eyes. "No one does, Tom. We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them and ensuring they don't happen again."
Agatha gathered the small group near the Enderby lawn, the snow still crisp underfoot, lanterns twinkling gently along the path. She had invited only a few villagers, those who had been directly involved or whose displays had been affected, along with Bill and, reluctantly, Tom. The air was cold but calm, carrying the soft scent of pine and the faint warmth of anticipation. Agatha's presence, steady and composed, set the tone. This was a reconstruction of understanding, not accusation. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice measured, warm, and unhurried. "We're here to retrace last night's events, not to judge, but to clarify what happened." She glanced at Tom, who fidgeted nervously, hands tucked into the pockets of his woolen coat. "Tom will help us understand the sequence, so we can see how a tragic accident occurred. I assure you, no blame is being laid here beyond what already lies in circumstance." Tom swallowed, nodding slightly, encouraged by Agatha's calm. Bill stood behind him, offering a reassuring presence, his hand lightly resting on Tom's shoulder. The subtle warmth of solidarity helped the young man straighten and begin. Agatha directed him to the precise starting point near the fuse box, where the tension and struggle had occurred. "As I approached the ornament," Tom began, voice quivering but clear, "I saw Graham adjusting the lights, making sure everything was safe. I panicked. I thought if he discovered the errors I'd made last year, it would ruin me in the village's eyes. I grabbed the star, but it caught, and he lost his balance." Agatha stepped in gently, pointing to the sequence on her diagram. "Notice the shadow along the hedge. From here, you couldn't be seen by anyone walking along the lane. The fall was sudden, and the lights were energized at that precise moment. That caused the surge, the minor scorches we observed. Everything points to fear-driven reaction, not malice." Bill added softly, "Tom's actions were understandable in human terms. He never intended harm. Graham's vigilance and his protective nature inadvertently intersected with Tom's anxiety, producing a tragic outcome." The villagers watched, silent, absorbing each detail. Their faces reflected shock at the intricacy of events, but also relief that no deliberate cruelty had occurred. Agatha methodically traced the path again, showing the sequence of the misconnected wires, the timer surges, and the yanked ornament that had precipitated Graham's fall. Every motion, every misstep, every hurried grab aligned logically with the observations she had made over weeks of investigation. Sheila,
Chapter 8. The Glow Returns. The morning after the reconstruction dawned crisp and clear, the sky pale and wide over Carsley. Snow lay undisturbed along the lanes, sparkling faintly in the early light, as if the village itself were taking a quiet breath. Agatha walked slowly through the main street, her coat snug against the chill, hands tucked into warm gloves. The usual bustle of the market was gentle, villagers greeting each other with softer smiles than before, their conversations tinged with relief and cautious optimism. Decorations, previously hastily repaired, now gleamed with renewed attention. Wreaths were straightened, lights untangled, and small flourishes added to each display, subtle gestures of care rather than competition. Agatha noted the small details with satisfaction. A star aligned perfectly on a windowsill, icicles twinkling evenly along eaves, and tiny hand-painted figurines peeking out from evergreen garlands. Carsley seemed to shimmer not just with lights, but with collective effort and tenderness. Sheila appeared at the Enderby house, surrounded by supportive neighbors helping to relight Graham's final project. The large, intricate display of interconnected lights now shone steadily, a careful tribute rather than a competitive spectacle. Agatha paused to watch Sheila step back, her hands clasped tightly over her chest, eyes glistening with a mixture of pride, sorrow, and gratitude. A small group of villagers lingered nearby, quietly observing, offering gentle words and a shared sense of remembrance. "Beautiful," Agatha murmured to herself, noticing how the lights reflected in the snow like tiny stars. He would be pleased. The villagers moved with purpose but without urgency, fixing minor issues and adjusting strands of lights that had sagged in the frost. Conversations were light-hearted, filled with laughter and teasing that had been absent in the previous days. Agatha smiled as she overheard Mr. Hensley joking with Mrs. Larkins about her tendency to place ornaments too high, while Mrs. Larkins shot back with mock indignation, laughter spilling into the cold air. Even Tom Thistle, still tentative, moved carefully among the houses, offering advice and assistance. The villagers greeted him with quiet acknowledgment rather than suspicion, his relief palpable. Agatha continued her stroll, her eyes catching small, deliberate gestures. A tiny angel perched on a fence post, a string of lights carefully draped to avoid any sharp bends, and the soft glimmer of lanterns along pathways. She realized that every corrected display carried a story, a shared act of redemption, of remembrance, of reconciliation. Carsley itself seemed to breathe more lightly, the tragedy of the past days transforming into something gentle and unifying. In the village square, children were allowed to hang small decorations on a communal tree, their cheeks rosy, giggling as they reached up or were lifted by patient adults. The act was simple, yet symbolic, a marker of life moving forward while honoring those who had passed. Agatha observed quietly from the edge, noticing how even the smallest gestures contributed to the collective healing, how every stream of lights and ribbon became a thread weaving the community closer together. She paused near a lamp-post, the glow falling softly across her face, and allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. Carsley had endured fear, confusion, and grief, yet it emerged calm, attentive, and compassionate. The villagers had restored more than lights. They had restored balance, care, and a sense of shared purpose. As she walked on, Agatha noticed the subtle changes in demeanor, softer tones, lingering greetings, and small acts of kindness. The streets were quiet, but vibrant in spirit, sparkling more than festive decoration. The glow of the village returned, not just in bulbs and candles, but in warmth, understanding, and the simple, enduring human connections that made Carsley truly home. Agatha settled into her favorite armchair by the window, the soft glow of the Christmas lights from neighboring cottages spilling across the room. The steaming cup of mulled wine rested in her hands, and the gentle scent of cinnamon and cloves mingled with the faint aroma of wood smoke from her hearth. Outside, the snow shimmered faintly, reflecting the glow of carefully repaired displays, each one perfectly aligned, as though the village itself had taken a deep, contented breath. She took a slow sip, savoring the warmth that spread through her chest. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of activity: suspicious notes, tangled lights, a tragic accident, and the unraveling of secrets. But now, at last, there was calm. Carsley had restored its cheerful rhythm, the villagers busy with subtle refinements, yet respectful of the limbering quiet that commemorated Graham's life, and the lessons learned. Agatha smiled faintly, appreciating the rare balance between chaos and coziness she had always secretly enjoyed. The cottage was silent, except for the gentle crackle of the fire. She let her mind wander, replaying the sequence of events, the careful deductions, the glimpses of human vulnerability that had guided her through the mystery. It wasn't just about finding answers, it was about understanding people, the small choices that carried weight, the courage it took to protect secrets, and the compassion that allowed the village to heal. Carsley's twinkling lights outside mirrored the warmth she felt inside, a quiet reminder of community and resilience. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her reverie. Agatha opened it to find Bill standing there, holding a single woolen glove. "I think this belongs to you," he said, his expression casual but friendly, eyes twinkling in the lamplight. "Ah, thank you," she replied, taking it and smiling. It was a small gesture, understated, yet it carried the comfort of familiarity, of steady companionship. He lingered briefly, chatting lightly about the village's repairs and the upcoming New Year's preparations, before turning to leave with a nod and a faint grin. Agatha closed the door and let herself relax again, the glove safely returned to its pair by the fire. She returned her gaze to the window, watching the soft glow of lights ripple across the snow-dusted gardens. Children had gone inside for the evening, their laughter replaced by the quiet hum of electric bulbs, steady and reassuring. Agatha traced the outlines of the cottages with her eyes, noting the subtle variations in color, the small personal touches, ribbons, stars, hand-painted ornaments that now seemed to glow with meaning. Each light represented effort, care, and memory, not just decoration. A flicker of curiosity and amusement stirred within her. Somewhere, perhaps not far away, another puzzle awaited, another gentle imbalance in the lives of the villagers that she would notice, investigate, and resolve. But for now, she allowed herself to savor the peace. The village had healed, secrets had been revealed without cruelty, and human connections had proven resilient. Agatha leaned back in her chair, swirling the wine gently, and let a slow smile spread across her face. The room was warm, the fire crackling, and the lights outside steady. She closed her eyes for a moment, appreciating the perfect blend of coziness, clarity, and quiet triumph. Carsley, her village, gleamed in the gentle winter night, and she felt fully present in the stillness, contented, and ready to face whatever future mystery might cross her path. But not tonight. Tonight, she simply allowed herself to breathe, to reflect, and to enjoy the luminous calm of home. Outside, the Christmas lights continued to twinkle, casting a soft, unbroken glow over the snow, steady and comforting. Inside, Agatha sipped her mulled wine, savoring the warmth, the peace, and the rare, exquisite luxury of a mystery concluded, at least for now.